I spent my entire life being the person who could fix anything. A scraped knee, a broken toy, or a boring Saturday afternoon. But none of that mattered the moment they looked at me with cold, unfamiliar eyes and told me I was a danger to the very children I loved more than life itself. How do you reconcile the fact that the people you grew up with, the people who shared your childhood home, suddenly view your existence as a moral contagion that needs to be quarantined from the next generation? And if they've already decided that you're a threat simply for being who you are, is there any path back to the truth? Or are you just waiting for the final bridge to burn? I've always been the cool aunt. Well, at least that's what I was for the longest time. I was the one who didn't mind getting mud on my boots, the one who knew exactly which trail led to the best fishing spot, and the one who didn't care if we were loud, messy, or covered in pine needles. My sister and her husband, Sarah and Mark, always seemed to appreciate it back then. I'd pick up my 2 nephews and my niece, pile them into my beat-up car, and we'd head out into the wilderness. Those days were the highlight of my week, maybe even my year. I felt like I was playing a vital role in their upbringing, showing them the world through a lens of curiosity and wonder. I wasn't just an aunt. I was a partner in their little adventures. I loved them with a fierce, protective intensity that I thought was clearly visible to everyone around me. But I suppose I was too busy looking at the world through their eyes that I didn't see the shift happening in the room behind me. About 3 years ago, the dynamic shifted from sunshine to ice in a single, agonizing conversation. It was a Saturday. I remember the smell of fresh coffee and the way the morning light was hitting the living room carpet, innocent and bright, completely betraying the darkness of the words that were about to be spoken. Sarah and Mark asked to have a sit-down with me. I thought it was about the kids. Maybe they wanted to change the schedule, or maybe the kids had a school project coming up. I walked in with a smile, already planning which creek we were going to visit that afternoon. The smile didn't last past the first sentence. They were stiff, leaning forward on the edge of their sofa like they were bracing for a fight, or perhaps a lecture. They told me, with voices that were eerily calm and devoid of the warmth I had known for years, that they were uncomfortable with me being around the children unsupervised. The air left the room. I felt that hollow, sinking sensation in the pit of my stomach, the kind that makes your ears ring. I asked them why, thinking maybe I'd done something reckless. Maybe I'd let them climb a tree that was too high or stayed out past dark. But that wasn't it. They weren't worried about the kids' physical safety. They were worried about their souls. They told me that because I was contemplating medically transitioning, because I was exploring who I was as a trans man, I was no longer safe. They didn't use the word predator explicitly, but the implication was heavy and suffocating. They said they were very Christian, and that they didn't want their children to be exposed to the idea that gender was fluid, or that it was something that could be changed. They were terrified that by simply existing around them, I would somehow infect them with the idea that they could change their own genders. I sat there, stunned. I have never once spoken to those kids about being queer, about politics, or about religion. I was the person taking them to find crawdads in the stream and teaching them how to tie knots. My identity had absolutely nothing to do with my relationship with them. Yet here they were, drawing a line in the sand and telling me I was on the wrong side. I felt my heart fracture. It wasn't just sadness. It was a deep, searing sense of betrayal. They knew me. They knew my heart. They knew I was the most loving, dedicated person in those kids' lives, and yet they were willing to discard that connection over a religious fear that had no grounding in reality. They viewed my internal journey, something I hadn't even fully acted upon yet, as a moral failing that made me a hazard to their family unit. The silence that followed their declaration was the longest silence of my life. I couldn't process it. How do you argue with a fear that is wrapped in the armor of religious conviction? You don't. I realized in that moment that no matter what I said, no matter how many times I promised that I was still the same person who loved those kids unconditionally, I was being judged by a version of myself they had constructed in their heads, a caricature of a confused or dangerous individual. I left their house that day with my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. I didn't go fishing with the kids. I went home, locked my door, and for the first time in years, I didn't have anyone to share my stories with. That year was a blur of silence, grief, and a loneliness so sharp it felt like a physical weight in my chest. I went effectively no contact with Sarah and Mark. I couldn't stand to look at their text messages, couldn't bring myself to hear their voices on the phone, and honestly, the thought of seeing them, knowing they viewed me as a threat, made me want to crawl into a hole and never come out. I felt like I was grieving them while they were still alive. Those kids were the center of my world, and suddenly, I was a ghost in their lives. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had ever done to warrant such a cold, calculated rejection. I replayed every interaction, every laugh, every secret they'd whispered to me, searching for some clue that I was secretly unfit. I found nothing. The irony was the most painful part. Here they were, claiming to protect these children from the confusion of gender identity, while simultaneously shattering the most stable, loving adult bond those kids had outside of their parents. It felt less like protection and more like a power play, a way to exert control over the narrative of their children's lives, even if it meant sacrificing the people who cared for them the most. I went through stages of deep self-doubt. Was I a bad person? Was my desire to transition somehow inherently selfish? But then, the anger would kick in. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just trying to exist, to become the person I was meant to be, and they were trying to stifle that by pinning a hazard label on my back. I stayed away for 12 months. It felt like an eternity. During that time, my transition started to move from contemplation into reality. I was navigating medical appointments, dealing with the emotional labor of self-discovery, and trying to build a life where I felt comfortable in my own skin. It's hard enough to navigate that journey with the support of family. Doing it while feeling like an outcast from your own kin is a special kind of hell. I missed the kids so much. It felt like an ache in my marrow. I wondered if they asked about me. I wondered if they missed our adventures, or if their parents had spun some sanitized, parent-approved story about why Auntie wasn't around anymore. Eventually, the wall I had built started to crack. It wasn't because I forgave them, not by a long shot, but because I missed the kids too much to stay a ghost forever. We had a conversation a few months ago, a forced, stiff meeting at a neutral location. Sarah apologized for making me feel bad, which, let's be honest, is the hallmark of a non-apology. It was a classic, "I'm sorry you felt that way," the kind of statement that validates your feelings only to immediately dismiss them as a personal failing of your own interpretation. She didn't apologize for the policy. She apologized for the emotional fallout of the policy. Their stance remained as rigid as stone. I was still persona non grata when it came to being alone with the kids. No fishing trips, no hiking, no unsupervised quality time. They kept that barrier up, and every time I'm forced to be in their presence, at family gatherings or holidays, I can feel that invisible wall vibrating with tension. I've become, by my own assessment, an asshole. When I see Sarah, I'm short with her. I don't participate in the performative, happy family charade. I don't pretend that everything is sunshine and roses. When she tries to make small talk, I give her one-word answers. I don't look at her with that old, soft, doting expression. I look at her with eyes that see right through her supposed piety to the fear and judgment hiding beneath. It feels like I'm betraying myself if I act like everything is normal. If I smile and act like Auntie, just like I used to, I'm essentially signaling that their discrimination is acceptable, that they can hurt me, alienate me, and treat me like a danger to their children, and I'll just roll over and accept it as the price of admission to see my nieces and nephews. But I can't do it. My soul refuses to participate in a lie that diminishes my own humanity. But then the internal conflict hits again. Am I being petty? Am I, by being this asshole, proving them right? Are they sitting there, telling each other, see, they're volatile, they're angry, they aren't stable enough to be around the kids? It's a trap, no matter which way I turn. If I'm nice, I feel like a coward, betraying my own transition and my right to be respected. If I'm cold and distant, I feed into their narrative that I'm the problem, the volatile trans person they were right to exclude. I feel like I'm in a constant state of defense, wearing armor every time I walk into the room, waiting for them to say something else, to look at me with that same cold, judgmental gaze. I want to be real with them. I want to tell them that their Christian morality is actually a mask for deep-seated prejudice. But I know that if I do that, the doors will slam shut for good. I spend so much time analyzing their behavior that I sometimes forget to look at the collateral damage, my own spirit. Every time I walk through their front door, I can feel my heart rate spiking, that familiar, stinging bitterness rising in my throat. I'm not just walking into a house, I'm walking into a courtroom where the verdict was delivered long ago, and I'm just waiting for the next sentence to be read. When I sit on their couch, stiff and guarded, watching my sister chat about the kids' soccer practice or their grades, I feel a physical sensation of being split in two. One half of me is the person they want me to be, the polite, silent, easy relative who doesn't rock the boat, who smiles at the right moments and pretends that my transition is just some small private hobby that doesn't impact our family dynamic. The other half of me is the man I am, the man who is fighting for the right to be seen, recognized, and treated with basic human dignity. It's an exhausting, nauseating duality. When I'm in that room, I don't feel like an uncle. I feel like a guest who hasn't been given the secret password to stay. And the kids, God, the kids, they're getting older and they're starting to notice. They look at me and sometimes I see that old natural affection, the way they used to run toward me when I pulled into the driveway. But then they look at their mother and their faces shift. It's like they've been conditioned to view me through a filter. I see them hesitate. I see them checking to see if they're allowed to laugh at my jokes or run over to give me a hug. That hesitation is the most gut-wrenching thing I've ever witnessed. It's a theft, plain and simple. They're stealing that authentic, pure bond we had and replacing it with this awkward, cautious, parent-monitored interaction. I often find myself wondering, at what point does my patience stop being a virtue and start being an enabler? By continuing to show up, by continuing to smile, even when it feels like a lie, am I validating their behavior? If I keep acting like we're cool, they have zero reason to ever reevaluate their stance. Why would they? From their perspective, the strategy is working. They kept the dangerous influence at arm's length, they set their boundaries, and I'm still here, playing the part of the compliant relative. They probably think their tactic was effective, that they successfully protected their children from the reality of my existence. It makes me want to scream. It makes me want to stand up in the middle of their perfect beige living room and announce exactly how much their values have cost this family. I've had moments where I've almost snapped, like the time last month at a family dinner when my sister made a snide comment about people who let social trends dictate their identity. She didn't look at me when she said it. She just stared into her wine glass. But the air in the room went ice cold. Everyone else pretended they didn't hear it, or maybe they just didn't want to get involved. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, my knuckles white from gripping it too hard. I could have called her out right then. I could have asked, "Are you talking about me, Sarah? Because if you have something to say it to my face." But I didn't. I just put my fork down, excused myself, and went for a walk around the block in the freezing cold. When I came back inside, I was the one who looked like the unstable one. The looks I got from her husband, Mark, were filled with that quiet, smug superiority. The look that says, "See, we were right to be careful." That moment of restraint cost me more than a fight would have. It cost me my pride. I realized then that my current strategy of being the asshole when I'm around her isn't actually working. Being cold or distant or short-tempered just gives them more ammunition to use against me. It reinforces the very narrative they built to justify excluding me in the first place. But if I'm not allowed to be myself, and I'm not allowed to be angry about it, what is left for me to be? I'm trapped between two impossible choices. Either I continue to be the good, quiet relative and slowly wither away from the pain of being erased, or I speak my truth and risk being completely cut out, potentially losing the chance to ever see those kids again as they grow up. The thought of not being in their lives at all is a nightmare. I want to be the uncle who shows them that you can be who you are and still be a good, loving, kind person. I want to show them that there is a world beyond their parents' bubble. A world where difference is a strength, not a danger. But how can I show them that if I'm never allowed to be alone with them for more than 5 minutes? I'm beginning to realize that the problem isn't just about my transition. It's about the fact that they don't respect me as an adult. They don't respect my autonomy. To them, I will always be the little sibling, the one who doesn't have the wisdom they've acquired through their narrow, rigid religious framework. They've decided I'm a child who needs protecting from myself, and by extension, they've decided my influence is something to be managed. That is the root of my anger. It's not just that they disagree with me. It's the patronizing, condescending way they've stripped me of my agency in my own family. The weight of that realization hits me in the middle of the night, when the world is quiet and the only thing I can hear is the sound of my own frustrated breath. It's a slow-burning realization that my anger isn't actually about being a bad person or an asshole in their eyes. It's about the fact that I've been grieving for 3 years for a relationship that, in its original form, no longer exists. I am mourning the death of the dynamic we used to have, and yet I keep trying to resuscitate it by showing up to these dinners and these family gatherings, hoping that if I just endure enough, if I just sit there with my jaw clenched tight enough, they'll wake up and realize they were wrong. But hope is a dangerous thing when it's tied to people who have already decided you're a lost cause. I think about the kids constantly. I think about the way my niece used to ask me, "Why are you so much cooler than mom and dad?" And how I used to laugh it off, telling her that they were just adults and I was the fun one. Now, I look at her and I wonder what she's being told when I'm not around. Are they telling her I'm confused? Are they telling her that my choices are a phase? The fear that they are actively poisoning the well, turning my own nieces and nephews against me by painting me as a cautionary tale, makes me want to burn every bridge. It's an act of violence in its own way, not a physical one, but a spiritual one, twisting their innocent perceptions of me to fit a hateful narrative. And then there's the hypocrisy of it all. They claim to be these devout Christians, full of love and turning the other cheek, yet here they are, ostracizing a family member, creating a culture of suspicion, and teaching their children that love is conditional on conformity. If they were truly worried about the safety of their children, they would look at my actions, the way I treat people with kindness, the way I show up, the way I have tried for years to maintain this relationship despite their cruelty, and they would see that I am a person of character. Instead, they choose to prioritize a rigid, fragile ideology over the living, breathing human being sitting at their table. I've started to wonder what would happen if I just stopped being the cool, quiet uncle. What if I stopped being polite? What if I actually challenged them? Not with insults, but with the truth. What if the next time we were all together and they made a passive-aggressive comment about my life, I didn't walk away? What if I looked them dead in the eye and said, "Sarah, Mark, I love these kids more than anything. My transition doesn't change that. But your treatment of me, treating me like a secret to be kept or a danger to be managed, that is hurting me. Is that the kind of lesson you want to teach your children? That it's okay to treat family with suspicion and coldness because of their personal identity?" I know the answer. I know exactly what would happen. They would double down. they would call me aggressive, they would label me unstable again, and they would probably tell me that it was better if I didn't come around for a long, long time. And that is the hook they have in my mouth. They know I love the kids too much to risk being completely shut out. They have weaponized my own heart against me. It's a brilliant, cruel strategy. They've effectively managed to keep me on a leash, where I'm allowed to see them only on their terms, in their environment, under their supervision, as long as I remain the silent, compliant shadow of the person I used to be. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm transitioning, not just in body, but in mind. I'm starting to realize that by playing along, I'm teaching the kids a dangerous lesson, that it's okay to let people mistreat you as long as you want to stay in their good graces. Is that what I want for them? To grow up thinking that if someone hurts them, they should just keep showing up and smiling until they're hollowed out? No. I want them to see someone who stands up for their own dignity. I want them to see that you can be kind and loving, but that you also have boundaries, and that those boundaries should be respected. This isn't about being an asshole. This is about finally refusing to be a doormat. It's about recognizing that if my presence is a threat to their children's development, then my absence might be the most honest thing I can offer. It forces them to look at the vacuum they've created. It forces the kids to ask, "Where is Uncle?" And it forces my sister to have to explain, without the benefit of me sitting there to make things polite, why she decided my presence was no longer welcome. It puts the responsibility for the broken relationship back where it belongs, on them. I've been so afraid of losing them that I've already lost myself in the process of trying to hold on. Maybe, just maybe, the only way to save the relationship in the long run is to step away from it right now, to pull back, to stop the forced interactions, and to let them see that I am a person who deserves respect. Because if I can't be treated like an equal, like a member of the family, then I'm not going to play the role of the safe, sanitized, supervised visitor anymore. I'm not a pet to be managed. I'm a man, and it's time I started acting like one, even if that means walking away from the people I love most. It's in the quietest hours of the morning that I feel the full weight of this choice. I stare at old photos of us, me with my hair buzzed, laughing while we wrestled in the grass, or the time we built that ridiculous lopsided fort in the woods behind their house. I look at those pictures and I realize that the person in them doesn't exist anymore. Not just because I'm transitioning, but because I've been systematically erased by the very people who were supposed to cherish me most. They haven't just cut off my access to the kids, they've cut off my access to my own history. Every time I see them, they act like I'm a stranger, an interloper who has to prove they're normal before they can get a cup of coffee. It's an insult that cuts deeper than any slur, because it's wrapped in the faux kindness of family values. Lately, I've been having these intense, vivid daydreams about just stopping. Just not showing up to the next holiday dinner, not answering the next text. I imagine the silence that would follow. I imagine Sarah calling, confused, asking why I'm being difficult or dramatic again. And for the first time in 3 years, I don't feel guilty about the idea of that confrontation. I feel a weird sense of peace. Why have I been working so hard to maintain a bridge that they've already set on fire? They want me to be the cool uncle without the scary identity. They want the benefits of my labor and my affection, but they want to keep the dangerous parts of me locked in a basement. It's a transaction, and it's a shitty one. I've been reading about boundaries. Not the kind people talk about on social media, but the real, ugly, necessary kind. The kind that aren't meant to punish the other person, but to protect your own sanity. I realize that my anger, the asshole behavior I mentioned, is actually my self-respect trying to break through the surface. It's my gut telling me that I'm worth more than being a tolerated guest in my own family's home. When I'm short with them, when I refuse to participate in their small talk, when I withhold the warmth they don't deserve, that's not me being a jerk. That's me drawing a boundary. That's me saying, if you treat me like a monster, don't expect me to act like a saint. The tragedy is that the kids are caught in the middle of this. If I pull away, I'm scared they'll think I just stopped loving them. But if I stay, what am I teaching them? That you should accept being treated like a pariah by people who claim to love you? Is that the legacy I want to leave them? I want them to remember me as someone who loved them, yes, but also as someone who was strong, who was authentic, and who stood up for what he knew was right. If they grow up and realize that I stepped away because I wasn't being treated with respect, maybe that's a lesson they'll actually need later in their own lives. Maybe they'll realize that family doesn't give you a license to be cruel. I think about the future, about when I'm further along in my transition, when I'm fully and unapologetically myself. And I hope, I pray, that one day they'll come to me. Not because I begged them, not because I apologized for being who I am, but because they'll realize that the person they pushed away was the only one who loved their children with such unfiltered, genuine joy. I want them to see that I didn't change into a monster. I changed into a person who finally felt whole. And if they can't see that, then that's a failing on their part, not mine. I have to believe that. If I don't, I'll never be able to live with myself. I know I'm not the only one dealing with this. I see stories like mine all the time. People who are forced to choose between their identity and their family, between their truth and their traditions. It's a modern tragedy, a silent war being fought in living rooms and across dinner tables everywhere. It's so easy for people to say, just cut them off. But it's never that simple when there are children involved, when there are memories involved, when there is a lifetime of love at stake. But there has to be a middle ground, right? Or maybe there isn't. Maybe there's just the choice between being broken and being alone. If you're listening to this and you've ever had to sacrifice your own happiness to keep the peace, you know exactly the kind of hollow, aching, infuriating feeling I'm talking about. And I want to ask you, what would you do? If you were in my shoes, would you keep playing the game, hoping that one day the rules might change? Or would you walk away, even if it meant risking the most important relationships of your life? I'm genuinely at a crossroads, and every day I struggle with whether to swallow my pride for the sake of the kids or to prioritize my own integrity. It's the hardest question I've ever had to answer. I sometimes wonder if they even realize that by trying to protect their children from the confusion of my transition, they've actually taught them a far more confusing lesson, that love is a conditional contract, signed in ink and subject to sudden, arbitrary cancellation. Every time I walk into their house, I see it in the way the children look at their mother before they look at me. It's that split-second hesitation, that glance for permission, that truly breaks me. It's the visual evidence of a boundary being drawn, a line in the sand that I am not allowed to cross. They've successfully turned a relationship built on spontaneity, shared laughter, and genuine affection into a rigid, monitored, and performative event. And here's the thing that Sarah and Mark will never understand, no matter how many times I try to explain it. They aren't protecting the kids from a version of me. They're protecting them from the truth of what a human being can be. They've decided that if someone is different from the blueprint they've laid out, then that person is automatically dangerous. It's not just transphobia. It's a profound, deep-seated lack of imagination. It's a fear of a world where things aren't as simple as black and white, right and wrong, or male and female. By keeping me at arm's length, they are essentially telling their kids that the world is a scary place where people who don't fit the mold are to be avoided, or at the very least, carefully watched. I catch myself playing the martyr in my own head sometimes, thinking about how much I've given up. I think about the fishing trips we never took. I think about the science projects I wasn't there to help with. I think about the milestones, the birthdays, the graduations, the firsts, that I have to watch from the periphery, acting like an ant who is just there to be seen and not heard. And the anger, the visceral, hot-blooded anger that I feel toward them. It's not just about me anymore. It's about the wasted time. It's about the fact that they've effectively lobotomized a beautiful, vibrant part of our family history for the sake of their own comfort. But then I look at the flip side. If I leave, if I finally decide that the cost of entry is too high, what happens to those kids? Do I just abandon them to the very environment that is teaching them to judge people like me? Do I leave them with no other perspective? Sometimes I think that my presence, even when it's restricted, is a form of quiet, subterranean rebellion. By being there, even when I'm being the asshole, I'm still an example of someone who exists outside of their parents' rules. Maybe, just maybe, the kids see that. Maybe they notice that I'm not a freak, that I'm just a guy who likes the same things they do, and that my existence hasn't set the house on fire. But is that worth the toll on my mental health? I've been living in a state of hypervigilance for 3 years. Every time I see them, I'm waiting for the next jab, the next passive-aggressive remark, the next time I'm treated like a guest who's overstayed his welcome. It's like living in a house with a gas leak. You don't always smell it, but it's there, poisoning you slowly, day by day. I've become bitter. I've become short-tempered. I don't recognize the person I see in the mirror sometimes. And I hate that they have the power to turn me into someone I don't want to be. I hate that they have the power to make me feel small. I remember reading once that you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. And that's what this house is. It's the place where my heart was broken, and it's the place where I'm expected to keep acting like nothing happened. I think I've been holding on to the hope that if I'm just good enough, if I'm just normal enough, they'll eventually come around. But that's a lie I've been telling myself. Their fear isn't logical, and it isn't based on anything I've done. It's a deep-seated, irrational conviction. You can't argue someone out of a belief that they didn't use logic to arrive at. So where does that leave me? I'm standing at the edge of this abyss, looking across at a family I love, and realizing that the bridge is made of rotten wood. I can keep trying to walk across it, and maybe I'll make it a few more times before it finally snaps. Or I can walk away and start building my own life, my own family, my own world where I'm not treated like a danger. It's a terrifying prospect. I'm scared of being alone. I'm scared of those kids growing up and thinking I didn't care enough to stick around. But I'm even more scared of looking back 10 years from now and realizing I spent a decade of my life trying to please people who never once asked me how I was doing. I think the biggest lie we're told about family is that it's unconditional. It's not. Family is a relationship, and like any other relationship, it requires respect, trust, and mutual support. If one side is constantly undermining the other, if one side is constantly treating the other like a threat to be managed, then the relationship is already dead, whether we want to admit it or not. I've been trying to perform CPR on a corpse, and it's high time I stopped and started mourning the loss for real. I've spent so many nights playing out the what-ifs in my head, but the reality is starting to crystallize. The truth is, my presence in their home has become a performance, a tragic one-act play where I'm expected to play the role of the cool relative while being treated like a dangerous contagion. I'm starting to wonder if my biggest mistake wasn't the transition itself, but the attempt to maintain a connection with people who have already decided that my existence is a moral failure. They've built a fortress around their children, and in their minds, I'm the barbarian at the gate. It doesn't matter how many times I prove I'm the same loving person. They've created a narrative that shields them from the reality of who I am, and they aren't going to let go of that shield. I look at the way they talk to me now, that forced, strained politeness that is meant to keep me at a distance. They act like they're being generous by allowing me to see the kids at all, as if I'm some kind of charity case. It's patronizing, and it's deeply dehumanizing. Every time I smile back, every time I nod at one of their passive-aggressive comments, I feel like I'm losing a piece of myself. I'm literally eroding, slowly being ground down by the sheer weight of their judgment. And why? Because I'm terrified that if I stop, the connection will vanish entirely. But I'm starting to see that the connection is already gone. What's left isn't a relationship, It's an audience, and I'm just an actor reading lines I don't believe in. There's this particular feeling I get when I'm driving away from their house. It's not just relief, it's a profound sense of exhaustion. I feel like I've been holding my breath for hours. My body aches, my nerves are frayed, and I have this metallic taste in my mouth, like I've been chewing on foil. I have to wonder, is any level of access to those kids worth this? If I'm not allowed to be myself, if I'm not allowed to show them that being authentic is a beautiful, brave thing, then what is the value of those visits? I'm essentially teaching them that you should hide who you are to be around the people you love. That's a lesson I never wanted to pass down. I think about the asshole label. I call myself an asshole because I'm short with them, because I don't engage in their small talk, and because I refuse to play the role of the smiling, docile aunt. But in a way, that asshole behavior is the only thing I have left. It's my way of saying, no, I am not okay with this. It's my way of resisting the erasure. If I were truly nice, if I were truly submissive, I would be validating their bigotry. I would be saying, you're right, I am a problem, and I'm sorry. But I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry for existing, and I'm not sorry for being who I am. The hardest part is knowing that the kids are caught in the crossfire. They're the ones who lose out on the uncle who takes them fishing and shows them the wonders of the forest. They're the ones who are being limited by their parents' fear. I try to remind myself that it isn't my fault. I didn't create this division. They did. They drew the line, they built the wall, and they put the lock on the gate. All I've done is try to reach over it, and for that, they've made me feel like a criminal. I've begun to realize that I need to stop asking for permission to be myself. I've spent 3 years waiting for their approval, for them to somehow wake up and realize that I'm not a monster. But that approval is never coming, and the sooner I accept that, the sooner I can stop living in this state of limbo. I'm thinking about setting a real, final boundary. Not just being the asshole, but actually saying, if you can't treat me with basic respect, then I'm not coming over. It's a terrifying thought, because I know they'll use it to tell the kids that I left them. They'll paint me as the one who abandoned the family. But is that so bad? If I leave, at least I leave on my own terms. I leave with my dignity intact. I leave as someone who refused to be a footnote in their story. Maybe one day, when those kids are older, and they start to navigate their own lives, they'll remember me. They'll remember the guy who loved them, the guy who was fun and cool and different. And maybe they'll start to question why their parents were so afraid of him. That's my hope, that my legacy to them isn't that I was a troubled relative, but that I was someone who knew who he was and refused to hide it, even when it cost him everything. I find myself standing at a crossroads that feels less like a choice and more like a final judgment on who I am allowed to be. Every time I see Sarah and Mark, I see their disappointment. Not because I've done anything wrong, but because I've refused to be the version of myself that fits their narrow, suffocating worldview. They wanted an aunt who played by their rules, who kept her mouth shut, who acted as a subordinate to their perfect family hierarchy. Instead, they got someone who actually has a spine, someone who knows that their identity isn't a lifestyle or a phase, but a fundamental truth of their existence. It kills them that I won't just fold, that I won't just apologize for the audacity of being happy in my own skin. Sometimes I think the anger they project onto me is just a mirror of the fear they feel in themselves. They're terrified of a world where their kids might see someone who lived differently and wonder why their parents were so afraid of that difference. They've spent years trying to scrub my influence from their children's lives, creating a sanitized, sterile environment where the only reality is the one they've curated. They think that by keeping me under their thumb, they're keeping their kids safe, but they're actually just keeping them small. I've started to realize that my asshole behavior, the clipped responses, the refusal to perform, the coldness, is actually a form of self-preservation. If I were warm, if I were the person they expected, they would feel like they won. They would think that my compliance was proof that they were right to be concerned. and that I was just a confused, wayward relative who needed their guidance to stay in line. By being distant, by being the difficult one, I am rejecting their authority over my life. I'm forcing them to confront the fact that they've pushed someone they once loved away because of their own inability to accept reality. It's not about being a jerk. It's about refusing to be a prop in their little play. But God, the toll it takes. There are nights when I feel so profoundly alone that I want to reach out, to just drop the act and say, please, let's just go back to how it was. But then I remember the look in their eyes, that pitying, condescending look that says, we know what's best for you. And I remember that the cost of going back is the death of my integrity. I can't go back to a place where I have to hide, where I have to pretend that my transition is a shameful secret. I'm a man. I'm an uncle. I'm a person with value, and I'm done begging for a seat at a table where I'm not allowed to be myself. If I walk away, I know the narrative they'll spin. They'll tell the kids that I left because I didn't want to be around them, or that I chose my selfish path over the family. That's the hardest part, knowing that they control the story, that I'll be the villain in their version of the history. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the truth will come out eventually. Maybe when the kids are older, they'll see me again, and they'll see that I'm not a monster, that I'm not a confused kid, but a man who stood his ground. I think about the future, about a day when I can look back at this and see it as the moment I finally broke free. I'm realizing that you can't make people love you, and you certainly can't make them understand you. If their religious beliefs force them to choose between their family and their prejudices, then they've already made their choice, and it's not me. It's their own dogma, and there is nothing I can do to change that. I've spent 3 years trying to fight a war I can't win, using weapons of love and patience, only to realize the other side was using walls and barbed wire. Maybe the real asshole move would be to stop fighting, to stop trying to be the good uncle who suffers in silence, and instead, just be the person who walked away to build a life worth living. It's not about abandoning the kids. It's about showing them that you can't be mistreated, even by family. That's a lesson that might save them one day. It's a lesson that says, your value is not determined by those who refuse to see you. And if that means I have to be the villain in my sister's story, so I can be the hero in my own, then so be it. I'm at the point where I'm ready to stop apologizing for my existence. The next time they look at me with that judgment, I won't look away. I won't shrink. I'll stand tall, and if they don't like it, they can be the ones to close the door. Because I'm done living in the shadows of their expectations. I'm done with the, I'm sorry you feel that way, apologies. I'm done with the polite silence. I'm ready to be heard. And if they aren't willing to listen, then there is no longer a place for them in my life. It's time for me to start living for myself. And if that means I have to walk away, then I'll do it with my head held high. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to water a dead plant, holding out hope that it might suddenly sprout green leaves again. For 3 years, I've been that gardener, pouring all my love and energy into a relationship that withered the second I started to speak my truth. I think about the kids, the way they used to look at me, with total unfiltered wonder, and the way they look at me now, shadowed by their parents' suspicion. That look isn't just a look, it's a barricade. It's the result of hundreds of small, quiet conversations I wasn't part of, little seeds of doubt planted in their minds. And that's the part that hurts the most. It's not just the rejection of me, it's the systematic corruption of how they perceive me. They aren't just protecting the kids from a transition, they're protecting them from the possibility that their own uncle, a person they once loved, could be a good, honorable, and worthy human being while being different from the rigid template their parents have built for the world. I've spent so much time dissecting my own behavior. Am I too angry? Is my asshole persona actually just a defensive wall I've built so high I can't see over it? I ask myself these questions while I'm sitting in my car, parked outside their house, gathering the courage to walk up the driveway. My hands are usually shaking. I feel like a spy in my own family, waiting for the trap to spring. And it always does. It's in the way my sister's husband, Mark, pointedly looks at his watch when I arrive, or how Sarah changes the subject the moment I mention a hobby or a passion that doesn't fit the traditional mold. They've successfully turned me into a specimen, someone to be observed, monitored, and evaluated for safety. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that I've been asking the wrong question. I've been asking, how do I make them understand? When I should have been asking, why do I keep needing their validation? It's a toxic cycle. I walk in, they treat me like a threat, I get defensive and difficult, they confirm their bias that I'm the problem, and the cycle repeats. It's a perfectly calibrated machine of rejection. And the only way to break that machine is to stop showing up for the operation. I remember a conversation I overheard between my niece and one of her friends once. She was talking about me, and she said, "My uncle used to take us fishing, but he's complicated now." The word complicated stung. It wasn't the kids' fault. They don't know what transgender means, or why it's a political lightning rod in their house. They just know that I'm complicated. They've been taught that my identity is an intellectual problem rather than a human reality. If I continue to subject myself to this, if I keep playing the role of the complicated guest, I'm tacitly agreeing that I am a problem to be solved. I'm agreeing that my existence is an inconvenience to their family structure. I'm done being an inconvenience. I'm done being complicated. I am a man, I am their relative, and I am a person who has spent his life pouring love into this family. If that's not enough for them, if that's a liability rather than an asset, then I'm not just going to be the asshole. I'm going to be the person who respects himself enough to leave the table. I know what happens if I take that step. There will be no more fishing trips. There will be no more sneaking them treats or telling them stories about the woods. The silence will be deafening. But I've realized that the silence is already there. The distance is already built. My presence is just a shadow play, a fake version of a connection that died 3 years ago. Walking away isn't an act of abandonment. It's an act of truth. It's saying, I refuse to be a guest in a house that doesn't welcome me. And if those kids grow up and wonder where I went, maybe, just maybe, they'll ask the right questions. Maybe they'll grow up to be the kind of people who look at the world with curiosity instead of fear. And they'll find me. They'll see who I am. The man who stayed true to himself, despite the pressure to be something else. And they'll realize that I didn't leave because I didn't love them. I left because I loved myself enough to not let them destroy me. That's a lesson worth teaching. That's a legacy worth leaving. It's far better than the lesson of stay and suffer, which is what I've been teaching them by my own example. I'm tired of being the villain in their narrative. But I'm even more tired of being a victim in my own. It's time to stop fighting for a seat where I'm not wanted and start building a life where I'm celebrated. If they want to keep their walls, let them. But I'm finished being the one trying to climb them. I'm going to go find the horizon. I'm going to go find the people who don't ask me to be less of myself to be in their company. I'm going to go live a life that makes me proud. And maybe, in the end, that's the only way to truly honor the bond I had with those kids, by showing them exactly what it looks like to be free. There is a quiet, ringing finality that comes when you stop trying to convince people that your existence isn't a threat. For years, I felt like I was holding a mirror up to their faces, trying to show them that the person standing there was still the same man who taught their kids how to skip stones, the same man who showed up for every milestone, the same man who carried their secrets and shared their laughter. But the mirror was broken, or perhaps they were just wearing blindfolds they refused to take off. They didn't see me. They saw a doctrine, a set of fears, and a political boogeyman that had nothing to do with who I actually am. I think about the asshole label again, the one I've been wearing like a badge of shame for so long. I realize now that it was never about me being mean. It was about me being present. It was about me taking up space in a room where I was only meant to be a ghost. By refusing to smile, by refusing to be the agreeable relative, I was inadvertently making them uncomfortable. And for the first time, I'm okay with that. Why should I be comfortable while they make me feel like I'm a hazard to their children? Why should I bear the emotional labor of keeping the peace when the peace is built on the foundation of my own suppression? The irony is that in their attempt to protect the children, they have effectively stripped them of the most authentic, loving mentor they had. They've replaced the joy of those woods, the excitement of our adventures, and the warmth of our connection with a sterile, monitored, and judgmental environment. If they truly valued their children's well-being, they would be looking at the way I treat people, the way I carry myself, and the love I pour into the world, rather than looking at my medical records or my personal journey. They have prioritized their pride and their rigidity over the actual, living, breathing happiness of their family. I've begun to reclaim my own story. Every day that I'm honest with myself, every day that I acknowledge that I am not a problem to be managed, I feel a little bit lighter. I'm starting to understand that leaving isn't the same thing as giving up. Sometimes, leaving is the only way to save what little remains of your own soul. I'm done with the "I'm sorry you feel that way" apologies that leave me feeling like I'm the one who needs to be fixed. I'm done with the polite silence that feels like a gag in my mouth. I'm ready to say, no more. I have this vision of the future, not a bitter one, but a hopeful one. I imagine a day, maybe years from now, when those kids are grown. Maybe they'll have their own apartments, their own lives, their own circles of friends. Maybe they'll encounter people who are different, people who are queer, people who live lives that aren't defined by the narrow, beige constraints their parents insisted upon. And maybe, in that moment, they'll think of their uncle. They'll remember the guy who loved the wild, who was always laughing, who was always himself. And they'll wonder why their parents were so afraid of him. They'll see the gap between the person they knew and the danger their parents described. And in that realization, they'll find their own way to the truth. That is my real goal. I'm not just walking away to protect myself. I'm walking away to preserve the memory of who I really am, so that when they finally see it, it'll be untouched by the lies and the fear. I'm going to go out there and build a life that is so vibrant, so full of love and integrity, that it stands as a testament to the fact that I was never the freak or the predator they made me out to be. I am going to be the man I was meant to be, and I am going to do it with my head held high, without waiting for their blessing or their approval. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt like an outcast in your own family, like a secret that needs to be buried, I want you to hear this. You are not a burden. You are not a complicated issue. You are a human being who deserves to be loved without conditions. And if the people around you can't see that, then it is their loss, not yours. Don't waste your life trying to shrink yourself to fit into their box. You were never meant to fit there. You were meant to be out in the world, living your truth, finding your own people, and building a life that is truly, deeply your own. I'm curious, if you were in my shoes at that crossroads, what would you do? Would you keep fighting for a place at a table where you're constantly being served judgment? Or would you walk out the door and find a new home, one where you're welcomed exactly as you are? Please, leave a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts, your struggles, and your wisdom. And if you've had to make the hard choice to walk away, I want to hear how you did it and what it felt like on the other side. You aren't alone in this, and sometimes just sharing the burden can make the path forward a little clearer. Subscribe if you want to follow the rest of this journey, and remember, your story is your own to write, and you don't need anyone's permission to be the hero of it. The silence that follows my decision to pull back isn't the hollow, crushing silence I felt when I was hiding my transition. It's a clean, sharp silence. It's the sound of a storm finally passing over. I've started to curate my life, piece by piece, filling the void left by their judgment with people who don't just tolerate me, but celebrate me. I found that when you stop performing for an audience that wants you to fail, you suddenly have so much more energy to be the person you were always meant to be. I started going back to the woods, the same trails I used to take the kids on, but this time I go alone, or with friends who know exactly who I am and don't need a disclaimer or a moral lecture to accompany our hike. The trees don't care about my gender. The river doesn't care about my medical history. They just exist, and in that existence, I found a strange, grounding peace that I never could have reached while sitting in my sister's beige living room. I think about the kids every single day, but the nature of my thinking has shifted. I've stopped viewing them as lost to me. I've started viewing them as individuals who will one day have to make their own way, just as I had to. I'm no longer waiting for their parents to grant me a reprieve. I'm living my life as a testament, a living, breathing rebuttal to every single lie they've been told about me. If I can be happy, if I can be successful, if I can be kind and generous and loving without needing their approval, then what does that say about the dangers they've been warned against? The truth is a slow-growing thing, but it's remarkably resilient. It'll find them eventually, whether their parents wanted to or not. I had a moment of clarity just last week. I was out at a coffee shop, and I saw a kid, around my niece's age, drawing in a sketchbook. I saw how proud they were of their messy, beautiful, uncurated art. And I realized that for all the years I spent being the cool uncle, I was also subconsciously teaching them that being cool meant having to be a chameleon, changing colors to fit the environment, hiding the parts of yourself that might make the adults nervous. That's not the lesson I want to leave behind. I want them to know that you can be messy, you can be different, you can be untraditional, and you are still worthy of every ounce of love in the world. And if the only way to teach them that is to be a ghost in their lives for a while, then that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. It's not just about me anymore. It's about the generation coming up behind us. If we keep letting people like Sarah and Mark dictate the terms of our existence, if we keep shrinking ourselves down to fit into their narrow boxes just to keep a seat at the holiday table, we're failing the kids. We're telling them that dignity is something you trade for belonging, and that is a lie. Belonging that requires you to abandon your own soul isn't belonging at all. It's a cage. I'm finally done with the cage. I've unlocked the door, and for the first time in 3 years, I'm walking out into the sun. I'm sure there will be more confrontations. There will be weddings, graduations, and family reunions where the air will be thick with the weight of what's been left unsaid. But I'm ready for it now. I'm not going in there with the expectation of being the good relative. I'm going in there as a man who knows his own worth. And if they want to make things awkward, if they want to bring up confusions or fears or concerns, they can do it. They'll be talking to a wall because I'm not playing that game anymore. I'm not going to defend my right to exist, and I'm certainly not going to apologize for finding my joy. This whole journey, this messy, heartbreaking, beautiful, and necessary transition has taught me one vital thing. You are the only one who has to live in your skin at the end of the day. You are the only one who has to look in the mirror and make peace with the person staring back. Everyone else's opinion, everyone else's values, everyone else's fear, it's all just background noise. If you listen to it too closely, you'll never hear your own voice. And your voice is the only one that truly matters. So here's where I leave you for now. I'm stepping out of the shadows. I'm going to go live a life so bright, so honest, and so full of purpose that it would be impossible to mistake me for anything other than exactly who I am. I've stopped counting the days since I last saw them, and started counting the days since I finally felt like I was living. It's a good feeling. It's the best feeling I've ever had. And if you're still standing at that crossroads, wondering if it's time to turn around, just know that the path back to yourself is always there, even if it's overgrown and hard to find. You don't have to keep walking the path they laid out for you. You can cut your own way through the brush. You can build your own home. You can start again. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for holding space for the parts of me that I was so afraid to show. If you've been through something like this, if you're fighting for your right to be seen, please know that you are not alone. Your truth is a beacon, even when it feels like it's being smothered. Keep shining, keep growing, and never, ever apologize for the person you're becoming. We're all in this together, and the world is better, brighter, and more beautiful because we're in it. Stay true to yourself, stay brave, and I'll see you in the next one.